crueldad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Siempre. Enfermedades y epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi misión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Good morning, rise up, everyone. Grand rising, everyone. Glad to be here with my co-host Akimba. Welcome to the Rise Up International Morning Show on Black Power Media Reloaded. Don't forget to share. Let your friends who are up as early as us know that we on. So share this link, like and subscribe to the channel as well, so that you, and also hit the notification so that you always know when we're on every morning at 7 a.m.
You got that down pat. Hey, what's happening though? What's going on?
Not too much, but enough. Maybe a little bit more, but it's good. It's good.
Get this together. Yeah. And a hooroo to everybody out there tapped in, man. I'm glad to be up this morning though and get the day started. They said early get that good worm.
Yeah. You know? That's what they say.
For sure. What's up? How you been though?
I've been good. I've been good. Just moving through life, getting things done, getting to the next thing after the next thing, keeping things moving. But things are good. What about you?
Oh, all is well, man. All is well. Organizing. There's a lot of Kwanzaa programs going on this week. And here we are on the eve of Christmas. You excited? You can't wait for tomorrow?
I ain't excited to do what? Excited to do nothing in my house? Yeah, I'm excited for that.
For sure. Hey, we actually, me and brother Jeru, he's been on this platform in the past. Me and him are going to be on We Charge Colonialism on Christmas doing the program. Bah humbug. I try to call it bah humbug. Been to that. We Charge Colonialism tomorrow, p.m. Eastern time. We're gonna talk a little Christmas, man. Christmas spirit.
That book by the brother. I'm forgetting his name right off the top of my head.
Talking about my Philly, bro. Ishaka.
Yes.
Ishaka Musa Barashingle.
And his book.
Yeah. I know all my Philly folk, man.
Okay, you repping Philly hard. That's good because
Hey, was holding it down.
You don't want to be the one out here and they looking at you like, ain't you from Philly? Don't you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a book. I'm not even gonna lie. I gotta look up his name. I actually forgot his name, but there's a brother. I read his books back in the day. The Culture Bandits. There was the Culture Bandits 1 and 2. Have you read that one?
No, I've actually never even heard of that one.
He was known as the correspondent. I wonder if the folks in the chat, if they know about Culture Bandits, man. That was a good one. And who that brother was. Let me see. It's been a minute. He actually passed away. Del Jones. I don't even know how. I should have remembered that. Del Jones, yeah. But Culture Bandits 1 and 2. That's a classic read. So check that out.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm gonna have to look into that and grab that one.
Yeah, indeed, man. Yo, there's been a lot going on.
We should probably also create a as BPM. We should start a running book list.
Mm-hmm.
Where
let's do it, man.
That that we talking about.
Let's do it. I'm with it. I always like to talk about a good book. But I was, just to pivot, because we was having a conversation before we jumped on here. We was trying to unpack something.
Yeah, we can unpack it with the people.
Let's unpack it with the people, man, because I don't know. Me and Natasha, we might be in disagreement over this. So let's find out. I mean, I think we're in agreement and disagreement. There might be a slight little,
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's the nuances of it. And these are things that we gotta iron out. We gotta get
There's some things we have to iron out. I just, I'm my whole thing is just to make sure that we're being consistent and people know what we're talking about. Of course, like Fat Joe has been in the news. If well, not necessarily the news, but on social media news. And he recently was on Math Hoffa's podcast. He was making comments about the group FBA, and which is a group. Some people may try to claim that it's a ethnicity, a nationality, but it's a group, But it's something that I think they try to place on people like me with my ancestors, going back to like South Carolina and of course like Africa, but being people who were here and were enslaved here. Because I think that's what they go back to those who were in the antebellum period, or so those people are found Black American. And so, that's they're trying to create this ethnicity, and I guess that would be something that they would place on me, even if I, deny being a part of that group. This is how I'm taking it. But Fat Joe made some comments about the group and their quote unquote leader, and Fat Joe uses the term. Can we say the N-word? Will they bleep that? I don't know how that even works. I guess, yeah.
I'm just gonna say N-words.
Say that again.
I said just say N-words.
N-words, but nigga, you know what I'm saying? This the internet. I forgot where I was at.
Rules are honestly in terms of what language you can use and which language you can't.
The FCC don't care as long as I ain't saying nothing against them other folks. I ain't even gonna say, then it's good. We can talk derogatory about ourselves all day, call ourselves everything under the sun, and FCC wouldn't. They could care less. But yeah. So FBA they on attack mode right now, coming at Fat Joe, and Fat Joe's is now, racist. People talking about, Fat Joe always is, he don't like Black people. I was seeing one brother talk about, those Black people who be around Fat Joe, they're from Honduras, so and he Oh, we on Black Power?
No, that was a glitch. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why that did
Glitch
that.
in the Matrix. Yeah, so I don't want to speak too much longer on this. I think you get my point. The whole thing, though, is like FBA is come out against Fat Joe, and this has been a big thing. It's being blown up in the social media because he called FBA broke niggas, right? But one thing I feel like if there's an issue with Fat Joe being racist and they have all this energy for Fat Joe, is America racist though? Like, it's bigger issues at play that we need to be focusing on. Like, y'all nossing around Fat Joe, someone who's been a part of like black culture for forever, probably all his life, grew up in the Bronx, part of hip hop culture. And he comes out and he attacks a group. So I mean, them defending himself, I'm with that. If y'all think y'all been offended, it's not more so me coming to the defense of Fat Joe against FBA, but it's just the hypocrisy and I think inconsistency of his group. And don't try to make it like it's a thing that Fat Joe has against all black people, like all black Americans. No, he's talking about your group in particular because your group, basically, all of this stuff, I don't even know if you know, it all stems from like a hip hop debate as well. Like, who was there in the beginning who started hip hop? Was it blacks, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, like together, who started this genre of music, or was it just black Americans and so forth? So it's kind of like it blew up from that, and that's why Fat Joe kind of went on this rant.
Yeah,
but,
I know. I've heard that conversation about Puerto Ricans, and hip hop and whatever. So I know what you're talking about in terms of that.
that's what it stems from. And so Fat Joe's in his feelings, and he's on the podcast, and now he's coming at that group for a particular reason. But my thing is to consider. I mean, if Fat Joe is racist, right? Are we saying that? And this is what we were talking about. That if Puerto Ricans can be racist, if Mexicans racist from like saying and having these feelings towards black people, can we say that black people can be racist? Because we have black people who say no, like black people can't be racist, right? And so why can black people be racist? Because we don't have institutional power. Well, do Puerto Ricans have institutional power here in the United States? Does Fat Joe represent institutional power here in the United States? And if no, then can he be racist? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's no consistency in that language. But you may disagree with me.
Yeah, I think number one, speaking to the whole Fat Joe situation, and the FBA and all this other stuff, we already know that the FBA, they don't like anybody that's not from born an African born in America, right? If you're not an African born in America, they already got something against you in general. But also, I think a couple things before I answer the question. I think one is Fat Joe, because anybody who's not black using the N-word, that's a whole nother story, right? But we know that there's
Fat Joe black though.
That's the question. That's what I'm getting to. Like, so we know that there's black Puerto Ricans. I know some black Puerto Ricans. And
there's black light-skinned Puerto Ricans.
There's black light-skinned Puerto Ricans. And if you look at Fat Joe, I mean, you can't see his hair texture or nothing, but if you look at the features, I mean, he looked like, if we would look at a light-skinned person here, what would be considered light-skinned, like Mariah Carey, some people consider her black. A lot of people that I know consider her black, right? Because she
has a black parent and a white parent, right?
Yeah, because she has a black parent. Yeah. But if you were to put her next to Fat Joe, like, he looks blacker than her, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So just because you're from Puerto Rico doesn't mean that you're not black. And that was part of the thing that I think Fernando, too bad we don't have our resident hip hop historian on here, Fernando. But when we're talking about Puerto Ricans, who are we talking about? Because that's the thing about Latin America, is that it's this it's made to be this blob of Latinos, right? As if there is no distinction between them. It's just like North America.
Where
you have Black people, white people, indigenous people, those coming from, some of them may or have more other immigrants than not. Also, there might be some Asians or Indians living there as well, but into to small populations. But in general, specifically thinking about the larger makeup, you have Black people, indigenous people, and white people that live in those places. And we're remembering Latin America. When we think about Latin America, we're thinking about people who speak Spanish because they were enslaved and colonized, by the Spanish, who are white people too, from Spain. So that's what so I think like those distinctions too are not even being thought of. So even when you say, okay, hip hop was started by Black people and Puerto Ricans were involved, if it's a Puerto Rican like Fat Joe, that's a Black person. Now, obviously, if you one of those, Puerto Ricans who's obviously, like Black, just kind of like Dominicans, but you don't want to claim your Blackness, okay, whatever, I'm not gonna put it on you. But I would say, Fat Joe is Black, so that's number one. So going back to what we were talking about before we got on, I don't think that Black people can be racist. I think that Black people can be, and you know what, this makes me think, and we could talk about an idea that I have afterward, but Black people can be discriminatory. We could be bigoted. We could be prejudiced, but we can't be racist. And I'm talking, and so that's what I mean when I say Black people. So I don't even like using blanket terms like Puerto Ricans or, Colombians. Like, there's Black people there. Who are we talking about? And there's white people there. Who are we talking about? There is actually too a book called Racial Innocence that kind of talks a little bit about this whole thing with like Latin America. Like, the book is called Racial Innocence: Unmasking Latino Anti-Black Bias and the Struggle for Equality. So that kind of talks about those nuances of, and the woman who wrote this book, she would disagree with me with whether Black people can be racist and whether Latino racist, but that term Latino is very misleading. And it's a term that is only really used within the United States and was created particularly because, people from Latin America, particularly, ones that are white, like they were, when you look into the history of, Latinos, they started to create the term within the United States, especially when we think about Hispanics, right? They started to categorize them in that way because of the fact that after they had been there for a while, after, Latinos had been, so when we think about the way that the California came to be in Texas, when we remember the whole struggle against getting the land from Mexico and all that other stuff, and the fighting that went up there to
the theft, the stealing,
the land grab. They were already,
pick it up.
Yeah, those places in like California and Texas and those borderlands, they were already kind of catching the hell in terms of the discrimination that they were receiving. But even though they were white passing Latinos, but then those ones who were not in those states, if you look into the early history of the creation of Latino and this term Hispanic that recently also came into being not too long ago, they started to make those distinctions because at some point those outside of California and Texas and those places in those border states, before they made those categories, were getting the benefits that white people were getting. They were like, okay, well, we don't really know, like these people might speak this other language, but they white, okay, fine. we can, they can get the same benefits, but when they started to grow in numbers to the point where white people were like, in other southern states were like, oh, okay, well, actually, who are these people? They speak in Spanish. Okay, let's make a category for them. But they were benefiting and have benefited, at different points historically, and have sided with, the United States in those kind of ways. But what we're talking about is those who can benefit, those Latinos that are white. And so the term Latino is very misleading, because you think Latino, you're thinking all of the people who live in, but at the same time that those white Latinos were benefiting from, the white supremacist structure that existed within the United States during Jim Crow, during segregation and all that other stuff, you also had anyone that was Black Latino not necessarily benefiting from it in that kind of way, in the same way those whites are. And so like the term Latino is just very misleading, because it doesn't disaggregate the population, and it talks about it as a, this whole blob of people, and you lose the discrimination. You lose the insight, and you lose the fact that like the people who are really being discriminated against are the Black Latinos. Yes, in terms of language, sometimes, you might have that, but there's still that hierarchy of race within Latin America. And those who are getting it the most are Black people within Latin America. There are Black people in Latin America. So that's a whole, I know I went whole nother.
Nah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because even, I'm gonna go back to this racism, question. But in America, when they are doing the census and they have the white population, count the white population, it's the white population. Then they have another category, white with non-Hispanics, it's something like that. How do they or Latin?
It's white Hispanic and then non-white Hispanic.
Yeah. So they have like these two different categories where like, okay, this is just straight white folks from Europe, right? And then it's a category where it encompasses those white folks from the Americas that could be from what they call Latin America, right? So those people are considered white as well. But you don't have categories like that. I guess, you do have, but not for like Spanish. It doesn't say like non-Hispanic. No, they do. I'm lying.
Yeah, no, they say
they do.
So they make the categorization of Hispanic and his white Hispanic and non-white Hispanic. They have,
but they do it for Black folks as well.
Yeah, they do those categories. Yeah, so as long as because it's like, okay, you could be, as they want to know, are you the white Hispanic or are you the other Hispanic, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so like they want to know those things, and they disaggregate it in that sense within, and that's not across the board. That's in some places. So like the census might do it, and sometimes you might be applying for something and you might see that, but that's not across the board. Every place is not disaggregating in that way. And also that's also what, when we talk about Latino, that's also how these white Latinos are writing off the backs of the oppression of Black people. So when places are like, oh yeah, we're diversifying, we have Latinos. Who are they generally? White Latinos.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, Latinos, we have it hard. But what you're really talking about is the discrimination that Black Latinos are facing. But you can benefit from that word, from that phrasing, from that kind of from that thing. So I definitely think that Black people can't be racist, and I maintain that across all Black people across.
Talk about that though.
Black people in Latin America, Black people in the UK.
I don't agree with that fully though. I don't agree with that fully. And I know I probably get in trouble because I know a lot of Black people do say that. I know a lot of Black people say that. I can't stop laughing because Earl's comment, man. I hear that.
I would say you just have to be Black. Period. I would say.
See, Natasha got an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that.
It's not a matter of, this is for me. it's not a matter of like, okay, how dark skinned are you or how much you throwing up your fists or whatever the case may be, but that you're Black, right? Because again, what I'm saying is that it's not that you can't be a bigot, you can't be prejudiced, you can't be discriminatory. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can't be racist because of the real definition of racism. I think, going back to
So, I mean, break that down then. Hold on. Let's get it. What is racism?
So let's go to the
everybody might not have the same definition.
Let's go to the Neely Fuller definition of racism. Okay.
I ain't gonna win this one. I'm gonna leave this one alone. You pull out Neely Fuller, it's over.
That's what we're talking about.
You win. You win. I can't even argue with that one. But
let's because that's the definition that I'm going with. And like he says, like if you understand racism and white supremacy, then everything else will confuse you. I think like that, especially having worked with children of all ages and adults as well, that especially in today's time, okay, we've gotten to such a simplistic definition of racism. When you ask people what racism is, it's just like, oh, when one group thinks that they're better than the other. Like literally, that's what most people that I've heard, even children, that's the definition that they use.
But I think it begins with that. I think it begins with like building this ideology around your group, quote unquote race, and the institutions that you develop forth is to advance your particular group or race over other groups. But it begins with just like this false idea about superiority, ethnocentrism, right? So the Europeans, because colonialism, these institutions of racism that the Europeans began to develop was a result of colonialism, imperialism. They had to build up ideas of why they were annexing people's land, enslaving people, oppressing and exploiting people, right? And so, yeah, Black people, I get what you're saying as far as just like Black people are as far as systemic racism, we're not exercising systemic racism, but I think Black people can develop ideas just like anybody else can, and we have developed ideas of superiority, of supremacy, and there are people who develop institutions and they'll use those institutions to empower Black people. Like, is that not a form of racism?
No.
How isn't it? How isn't it though?
So okay, look. So let's say you and I'm
was the Nation of Islam practicing racism?
No, I would say no, absolutely not. So what I'm saying is, okay, the mere fact of somebody saying, okay, I think I'm better than or even a group, right? The mere fact of a group saying, I think I'm better than let's say they think they're better than every other group in the world. The mere fact of you thinking that does not automatically make you racist, right? Let's say, okay, you think you're better than everyone. You want to build your stuff up, okay. Does that make you racist? Absolutely not.
If you build institutions, like, and Dr. Carl Anderson talks about this as well, in regards to with race. So, I mean, if we bring him into it.
Yeah, but let's bring him in.
Let's bring him in. Pull his book up, but he talks about racism, and race being sort of this competition between different groups of people. That was racism. Advancing your group over another group. No. Europeans was practicing that form of racism.
Absolutely not, because you can advance just because you're advancing your group. Your group does not mean you're automatically disadvantaging another group.
If you're discriminating, though, like
listen. Discrimination within itself is not a terrible thing, right? Just like when we think about words, like if you even go into the etymology, right, of discrimination, the word goes back, right? It's to discern. It's more about discernment, discriminant, or whatever. I'm not going to go pronounce these Latin words, but it's to distinguish between. It's to discern. That's all it is. Now, what you do with that discernment and what you do with those people, that is where you come into racism, right? Where you're setting up a system of benefiting off of, oppressing those others, right? Those who you've determined are different from you. Because discrimination within itself is just like the swastika, right? The way that we know the swastika.
Man.
Took a sacred symbol and made it a negative symbol, right? But that does not mean that all of a sudden that symbol is no longer sacred. That now you have to go back before Hitler to thousands of years of using that sacred symbol, and that now all of a sudden it can't not stand for that. Like when I went to Ethiopia and we went into the Stone Mountains, have the 12 churches, right? Which is like one of the, I don't know, wonders of the world or one of those heritage sites, or whatever. Stone Mountains built thousands of years ago by an Ethiopian king, and you have that sacred symbol carved into the walls of that stone church thousands of years before Hitler was even born, even on this planet. So now we're going to say that, because Hitler used it in a negative way, that all of a sudden now you have to go back and erase that history? Absolutely not. White people have been, using things and taking them and, using them in ways that are detrimental, doing things that are detrimental, and that we have to, so there's a certain way that we think about it with them, but that does not automatically mean that now that is the only definition of the term. People discriminate all the time. That's what we do. We create categories as a people in general, anybody, right? Where, this is water, this is this. You're putting things into categories to make sense of the world. People do that automatically. That's just what it is. But what do you do? Right? Just a simple thought does not equate to anything. There are groups with even when you think about.
But I'm saying it's not just a thought. I get that much, but there's actions. There are Black people that have actions behind just the idea, where they build institutions. We could really get into it. Like, even, with you have groups who are exercising practice are putting together like plans to even wipe out other groups. They think some groups don't even need to be here. And these are not people who are European. As far as power, there's definitely like the exercise of power is disproportionate. But I don't think that Black people are powerless. Like, I feel like we're not powerless. We might not be exercising power to the best of our ability. We're unorganized, but I think that we do exercise. I don't think that we're completely powerless if we're talking about Black people in America or around the world. But if we're just talking about it in America, we do have spaces. Well, yes, we are under a system of white domination. The political, economic institutions, we do not control those.
But that's what racism is a system of white domination. It's a system of domination. That's the only one that you have. Yes, it's a system of power and domination. So that's why, I say no, Black people cannot be racist. Yes, we can be bigoted. Yes, we can be
But
prejudiced.
this institutional power, but what Black people have institutions where they discriminate against other groups of people, which you can say is a form of oppression. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you had institutions and you can, I know people, hey, I'm good. I ain't mad at folks that's doing it, because it's trying to bring some balance back in the world. So I'm not saying this as if it's like something, negative, because because of how things are disproportionate, right?
Let me ask you this question, and we can move into a Black Power break.
I know we going in on this, John.
I have a show on this. But what I'm saying is, okay, let me ask you a question, right? Think about this and you can answer me. Let's say pre-colonialism, pre-enslavement in the way that we, chattel slavery in the way that we know it, pre these societies, as, these particular ones that we know here, like America, or, we talk about Latin America, where you have a mix of all of these different kinds of people. Black people, white people, indigenous people, right? Not because that was something that existed, but that it was a forced creation, right? You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So outside of that, when you have Africans, mostly, on the continent, we're talking about like pre-colonialism, all that other stuff. You have the Chinese doing their thing, the Japanese, the Europeans, whatever. And even let's maybe think about China, right? Where where they, when you learn history here in the United States, they talk about like, China and their ethnocentrism. And so let's give them as an example, right? During that time, they would say, they were ethnocentric. They thought they were the center of the world. They thought they had the best culture and this and that. So did that equate to what we see that, what we saw the Europeans do with that same line of thinking? Did they also go out there and kill and maim and genocide everyone else because they thought that they had the best culture on earth?
See that the premise of Europeans doing that because they thought they had the best culture, I don't agree with that. Like I believe that there was a material interest that Europeans had when they went around the world. Yes, I mean the idea that Christianity. I don't think that this idea that we're white, and we're better than everyone else, like that began to develop over time because white people and black people, Europeans knew that Africans existed. Africans was all throughout Europe for centuries, for going back over 1,000 years. Mm-hmm. It's not that they do. They're that existed. So what made Europeans begin to codify race? Like, where did that come from? That had a lot to do with colonialism, wanting to be able to rationalize or justify their position of power and why they were enslaving Africans and colonizing Africans and indigenous people. But I think that there was a material interest. It was Africans all throughout. Africans was ruling. And talk about, the Moors. They ruled parts of the Iberian Peninsula for hundreds of years. There was Moors. We were reading Gerald Horne. Dr. Gerald Horne talked about the Africans, Moors, and the English coming together to fight against Spain, because they had a common interest. So they didn't have any problem uniting with black people against a common enemy at that time. And I'm not saying like prejudice and all of that, didn't exist against black folks for sure. But that's just me, material. Just to answer your question,
right? But that's what I'm saying. Like, so even also to add to that, within that, groups of people are doing things that benefit them, but it's not necessarily at the detriment of everyone else. Like when we're thinking about those things,
for you, racism has to be to the detriment of other groups of people. Maybe that. Because to discriminate and to discern is not automatically a terrible thing. That doesn't automatically mean you're then creating a system of racism. All right, maybe it's our definitions, man. Let's move on. We gonna have a part two. We're gonna have a part two. We're gonna bring the crew on. I might be in the minority in this one. See, I'm a minority. They discriminating against me, man. But this ain't racism because we all black. I guess we can go to a Black Power break. And I actually, when we come back, we still really are going to be on this topic because I want to talk about the teacher who made some discriminatory. They didn't say racist remarks in the news. They said discriminatory. So.
See, look, they trying to make distinctions here, huh?
For sure.
All right, we'll be right back after this Black Power break.
Reason for believing in extremism. Intelligently directed extremism. Extremism in defense of liberty. Extremism in quest of justice is because I firmly believe in my heart that the day that the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights, when his own freedom is being jeopardized to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself. I live in America where there are only 22 million blacks against probably 160 million whites. One of the reasons that I'm in no way reluctant or hesitant to do whatever is necessary to see that black people do something to protect themselves, I honestly believe that the day that they do, many whites will have more respect for them, and that there will be more whites on their side than are now on their side with these little wishy-washy love thy enemy approach that they've been using up to now. And if I'm wrong, then you are racialists. As I said earlier, in my conclusion, I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam. I believe in Allah. I believe in Muhammad. I believe in all of the prophets. I believe in fasting, prayer, charity, and that which is incumbent upon a Muslim to fulfill in order to be a Muslim. In April, I was fortunate to make the Hajj to Mecca and went back again in September to try and carry out my religious functions and requirements. But at the same time that I believe in that religion, I have to point out I'm also an American Negro. And I live in a society whose social system is based upon the castration of the black man, whose political system is based on castration of the black man, and whose economy is based upon the castration of the black man. A society which in 1964 has more subtle, deceptive, deceitful methods to make the rest of the world think that it's cleaning up its house, while at the same time the same things are happening to us in 1964 that happened in 1954, 1924, and in 1984. They came up with what they call a civil rights bill in 1964, supposedly to solve our problem, and after the bill was signed, 3 civil rights workers were murdered in cold blood. And the FBI head, Hoover, admits that they know who did it. They've known ever since it happened, and they've done nothing about it. Civil rights bill down the drain. No matter how many bills pass, black people in that country, where I'm from, still our lives are not worth 2 cents. And the government has shown its inability, or either its unwillingness, to do whatever is necessary to protect life and property where the black American is concerned. So my contention is that whenever a people come to the conclusion that the government which they have supported proves itself unwilling or proves itself unable to protect our lives and protect our property because we have the wrong color skin, we are not human beings unless we ourselves band together and do whatever, however, whenever is necessary to see that our lives and our property is protected. And I doubt that any person in here would refuse to do the same thing were he in the same position, or I should say, were he in the same condition. One step farther to see am I justified in this stance. And I say, I'm speaking as a black man from America, which is a racist society. No matter how much you hear it talk about democracy, it's as racist as South Africa, or as racist as Portugal, or as racist as any other racialist society on this earth. The only difference between it and South Africa preaches separation and practices separation. America preaches integration and practices segregation. This is the only difference. They don't practice what they preach, whereas South Africa preaches and practices the same thing. I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than the one who comes up like an angel and is nothing but a devil.
It's glitching this morning.
Hey, we in the Matrix. We in the Matrix, man. So it makes sense. I ain't even, tripping. Nah, brother Malcolm. Next year is the year, Malcolm. The centennial is coming up.
Oh yeah, right. It's 2025.
Big time, man. We in here. We over here in Philly organizing for the 10th annual Malcolm X Day Festival. Definitely follow on IG at CMXD, Claim Malcolm X Day, CMXD Philly on Instagram to get updates. But yeah, it's gonna be big. It's gonna be the 10th annual one at Malcolm X Park in West Philly. So looking forward to that. Part of the Claim Malcolm X Day committee. And things looking good. We already started organizing for it like a month or two ago. So we ramping up for the centennial. And this year, like every year, we usually have it on the day of Malcolm X's birth, May 19th. But this year we're going to have the festival on May 17th. The reason being, because that's a Saturday, but the reason being is we plan to come to New York on May 19th. You already know.
Yeah, because that's what I do every May 19th.
Yeah.
Go to the pilgrimage that we take up to his gravesite, and we do a ceremony kind of there, and people talk and remember and do all the communities things that are done that day. And then there's the shut them down also on one for Malcolm X that the December 12th movement does after. Not afterward, because sometimes if you go up to the pilgrimage, the shut them down might have already started, and they're ramping up as well to do something major for this centennial. So,
what's the actor from The Wire that passed away? Michael is it Mike? Omar on The Wire. But
yeah, I forget his name. I can look it up real quick.
Okay, now the last time I was at the Malcolm X shut him down, Williams. Okay, yeah, the last time I was at the shut it down on 125th on Malcolm X Day, he was marching up and down 125th with us. He even talked to the people like he was in the trenches with the people organizing down there, shutting down 125th. Like that's the type of person that he is. That's a side that a lot of people don't know of or saw, when he was here. Down to earth brother. And Fred Hampton Jr. was with us as well. We was all marching up 125th. But the interesting thing too, that now that we're on this topic, we were about Fat Joe. That's how we began this whole conversation about racism. Fat Joe pulled up on us that day. And like Michael Williams went over to him and gave him a handshake and whatever, but he pulled up. He was in his car. But it's interesting that going like full circle back. To Joe.
Yeah, back to exactly. Yeah, back to what
Joe.
we were talking about. Yeah.
But any thoughts on the video before we get the story? Was there anything you wanted to raise?
Anything I want to raise from the video, I think I'll make the connection with the story. What about you?
Okay, yeah, for sure. Like the story that I'm bringing up in New York, there was a teacher who made some discriminatory remarks or racist remarks to a couple of the students in the class who were of lighter hue. And she asked these students if they were purebred. Oh, you pulled it up. Okay, all right. She asked the students if they were purebred, and she made a comment about the texture of their hair. The students' parents are suing. They actually moved to Pennsylvania, suing the school, and the case has been moved to White Plains in New York. So White Plains, but this happened in a rural area. In the story, when I was reading the story, it was saying in a rural New York area. I'm like, rural? Like, I'm thinking.
I mean, when they say rural New York, we know that like further upstate New York is rural. But when they say that, rural New York, I do want to know, okay, exactly where are you talking about?
Where are you talking about? Yeah. And
then if the case was moved to White Plains,
from rural New York?
Yeah, I'm like, White Plains from rural New York, that's kind of like, hours away in terms of where I'm thinking rural New York is. But yeah.
You know, if black people lived in this rural New York, would it still be like if it was predominantly black, it'd still be rural New York? But you know, that's another conversation. But this is interesting. Check this out. So, in response to the complaints to the administration by the two students who at the time were in the 9th and 11th grades, the lawsuit says school district higher ups said Messina, this is the person who made the comment, and this was a white teacher. Messina could not possibly be bigoted because she ate tacos.
Oh, is this the one?
That is Messina is, and they is. I don't know what that. Y'all probably better than me. But apparently eating tacos means that you're part of the LGBT community.
What?
I don't know. I'm out of touch. I'm out of touch too
because I didn't
see
know
if the
that.
uprisers they might can educate us on that, man. Like eating tacos, that's what that means. And some people say that really last thing I'll say is like some people said that may mean that could be interpreted as she eats Mexican food or something, so she can't be racist.
That's what I thought. As soon as I saw because she ate tacos without reading the whole thing here,
yeah,
I thought like, okay, what does that mean that she's Mexican? But when
no, that's not what they meant.
Don't get confused. Because this is why they give you that little definition right here. That little dash is like,
oh my goodness, man. My stomach turning right now. But anyway, like that was the excuse of why she be racist. You know, they did say that the remark was discriminatory. What do you think about this? And again, going to the selected outrage, like if Fat Joe, whatever Fat Joe's comments or whatever, if you mad about that, have that same energy for this. And we could probably find a whole lot more stories if we really do digging. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think, also have that same energy for the larger system of white racism that exists. Have that same energy for the system of racism that exists, because that is whatever you think is happening on the smaller level, like on the bigger level, is happening much, much more. This is just an outgrowth. Whatever you think is happening on the local level is an outgrowth of the larger societal structure.
It's just a reflection.
So fight that. So you want to, you have a complaint, take it further up.
Hey, but they don't want to do that, though. They don't. They want to. This social media age, people want to go viral, and they're not really trying to solve no problems, right? You thinking that spending time and energy on Fat Joe is going to solve the problems that Black people are facing? I don't know. I think it's selective outrage. I don't hear none of them talking about this story. I'm not seeing this going viral and people making YouTube videos. Like they're making YouTube videos around that interview. I'm not seeing people make YouTube videos around this. So I don't know. Selective outrage to me.
Yeah,
so
I think it's also not just selective outrage, but it's controlled outrage, meaning that what we lift up in terms of things that must be known and talked about is also in a sense chosen for us as well, because of the mainstream outlets and the algorithm. What do they push forward? Like, they would rather you be talking about that than actually be talking about this story, right? Like I also don't think that like many beside the local media that's probably there reporting it in that town, in those towns or whatever, that you're not going to really see that on a CNN, but you might end up seeing the Fat Joe thing on a CNN or something. You know what I'm saying? Because they've brought up, pop culture stories in that sense. And so I think that we know that we're being trained to pay attention to what they want us to pay attention to. They're what do some people say, like now, like attention is currency, right? That we're in an attention economy. And so they are controlling the flow of where our attention goes. Mm-hmm. And we're fighting to get the people's attention for it to go this other way. And so that's what I mean by what I say, like, I think it's also controlled, like, our attention in terms of us paying more attention to Black Joe.
Black Joe, you gonna get us canceled. You gonna get
paying attention to Fat Joe, us paying attention to Fat Joe is something that they're okay with, because like you said, right, where you're not going to really be focusing on these stories, you're not really going to be challenging and making an uproar within your own even local community in that sense, right? Or even have it catch fire and other different communities, communities are supporting you and, raising hell around that issue. But instead, you can just have an online back and forth about, and make memes and all that other stuff about Fat Joe. That threatens nobody. That has, the potential to not really go anywhere, to not really, make people really dig into and get a real analysis of what this society, the bigger problem, the bigger glaring problem that this society has, which is, the system of racism.
Yeah, speaking of the biggest society, societal issues, we actually have a guest coming who's going to be coming in, who's going to be joining us in a few minutes. And peace to the chat, man. They got me rolling right now. I'm sorry. I'm trying to maintain myself. But peace, everybody. Everyone for tapping in. I guess Shannon, who has been with us a couple of times before, and last time she joined too, we were having a conversation. This was before. Basically, we're going to discuss this Daniel Penny trial. Recently wrote an article on that up. Looking forward to getting into. But she's been on. Last time she was on, we was going back and forth. I don't know who was tapping that, but we was going back over what we thought the of this case was going to be. And unfortunately, my intuition told me that this isn't going to end up in a guilty verdict for Daniel Penny. And we'll get into the story because some people might need some context. But Shannon will be joining us in a few minutes.
We can get into giving the context a little bit now. Okay. Right before she joined.
So that people are prepared. So if you're not, and you can add on to anything that I leave out, but if you're not familiar, Jordan Neely was murdered by this guy, man. Let's post this picture so people know what this crook looks like. But Jordan Neely was choked to death by this vigilante who said he was doing it because he felt that if he didn't let go, this was his words, if he didn't let go, there was a oncoming train that Jordan Neely would push someone on the tracks. And so he was coming up with all types of excuses to justify the prolonged chokehold that resulted in the murder of Jordan Neely. So it's just a trial. With the trial, I think maybe a month lasted, maybe a month or 2 months. But Jordan Neely, the jury was, do you call it a deadlock? Like they couldn't come to a decision. After the first time, the judge asked the jury to go back and discuss the case further. If they can come to a conclusion, and they still able to do it after the second time. The judge dismissed charges, and so Daniel Penny is now on the streets free. And as far as I know, this guy's like a millionaire, man. He was able to raise a whole bunch of money before the trial and raise something like $400,000 during the trial. And so, this guy he goes scot free for murdering a African and was able to accumulate a lot of so he also was invited by not Donald Trump, JD Vance, the vice president elect, to come sit at a game, Army and Navy game with and President elect Donald Trump. So they're looking at this guy as some sort of like hero for this murder of Jordan Neely. And and Shannon's going to come and join us and sum that up. I don't know if there's something you also want to add on to that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things too that I know that particularly there was recently last week, Wednesday, if I'm not getting the dates wrong, a rally around the outcome of the case, but also around the response of the Black community around the case within itself by the December 12th movement, who organized a rally last week to talk about it and to talk about what Black people are going to do about this. Because I think one of the things about it that people have been talking about, at least some of the people that that I know, is in terms of the response to this. So the way in which white people responded to this by making this guy Daniel Penny a millionaire, and what Black people's response was in this case in terms of the pushback to this whole thing. Just like the how do we organize our outrage in our and ourselves around this case, and how better to do that right now, moving forward too, in light of this the outcome of the case within itself. So I think that in terms of this case and thinking about what needs to be done, I think that it's not enough to just say, okay, yeah, damn, that's crazy, the verdict, and be upset because of the verdict came back as it was. Because like you said, we know that, like, to a certain extent, we're not too surprised when they come up with these verdicts, and the way in which they support each other, right? It goes back to this idea that they're going to do what they want to do, but what are we going to do? Because they're showing you who they are, and we already knew who they were, in terms of what's happening, and having white people just be another overseer and get to do the things that they want to do without punishment. So I think our response to what is happening is what's necessary right now.
No, I appreciate that. And we was warming the seat up for you, my sister, Shannon, so we get a little context, but I know this is something you've been following, been a part of, spent some time in the courtroom, so you have some insight perhaps that we don't have, and you've been here a couple of times just giving us updates on what's been going on, or what was going on with the trial. And here we are. The trial's over. The struggle continues. And you recently written an article summing up as well. And so definitely want to get into that. And any initial thoughts on this since last time we've been talking? What's going on with you though?
Oh, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
There we go. Hello, everybody. Uhuru. I think it's a time for serious introspection on our part as African people. As I've said on the times I've appeared on this program during the trial, that, we struggle to have a presence inside the courtroom, outside the courtroom, and in the community around what was happening with the case directly, and the social and cultural meanings of what was happening. And that may have something to do with, maybe not totally, but have something to do with who Jordan Neely was at the time of his murder by Daniel Penny. A homeless person who may be misusing or abusing substances, really desperate at that moment. And I think sometimes African people can struggle with, if we don't directly identify with that person, we won't support them in ways that we may support someone else if we don't directly identify with that person. Right? Someone that may be severely, we don't use these terminologies anymore, but I'm old school. Someone that could be severely and persistently mentally ill, a homeless person, a person that may have chemical abuse issues, that lives in the subways, people that have to use performance in the MTA system as a means of gathering additional income to survive. We may not see ourselves in that in order to rally the appropriate levels of support. So this is a very introspective time, I believe, for African people.
Yeah. I'm initial reaction or initial thought, I'm gonna say, goes to the sister who was recently set on fire. I don't know her background. They said she was sleeping on the train, and the guy, I can't remember what country. I don't even want to say, but it was I think it may have been a South American, Central American country, right? So I don't want to put the wrong country out there, but set on fire. I don't know if she was homeless or not, because sometimes we're tired and we might not on the train. So
true that. I mean,
yeah.
Especially at the last stop, which we call, actually, this is in my neighborhood where this occurred. So we call that the end of the line.
Okay.
So that's the last stop on the train. And pretty much folks fall asleep all the time. And have to be, awakened by employees of the MTA. So we don't know very much about that. But what I've said consistently, and what other concerned citizens, activists, and organizers have been saying, is the MTA is that chasm of conflict, right, around what happens in the subway system. This is where all of the social services have collapsed, and people use the subways as a home, as a means to survive and live. It becomes their kitchen, their bedroom, the place where they recharge before going to second and third jobs. And who's there usually waiting? The police. And as we saw in the case of Jordan Neely, vigilantes are also waiting.
Yeah.
There.
And I mean, that's the
problem. Not to mention, Kathy Hochul insert an additional 250 National Guard, but the National Guard are not at every station. They're at very particular stations. They, in our hoods, they're in stations that are in quote unquote gentrified neighborhoods, and then popular tourist attraction stations, which is it's telling in of itself.
Yeah, and the reason, because you get to the point I wanted to make, because the reason I brought up the sister, again, it's just like this failure on the system to address these problems, these issues, people being those people who are dealing with mental health issues, that's on the streets, not getting services for whatever reason, and the amount of money that the city has could be used to pour into these people who are the most vulnerable, part of the most vulnerable population, right, in the city. But what happens is you have this case, and you have one person who's propped up as a hero. Jordan Neely is no longer with us, and now the case is over, but no one is addressing like the underlying issue, like how did we get to the point where we had a Jordan Neely who was in that situation where this vigilante can come and do what he did, right, and get off scot-free? Like, how did we even get to that point, right? And addressing like the systemic problem in New York City, right? Nobody has come out and said, well, Mayor Adams, he did, I think he did make a comment, but, making the comment and actually like putting things in play, like putting some policies forward to say that we're going to address this issue is something different. Nobody is having that conversation.
Well, I will say this. I think we need to wake up on that. That's why if folks check out my Substack article around Jordan Neely, I ended it with Wukusu, which means wake up, clean up, stand up, right? And the first part, the Wu in the Wukusu, is to wake up. And wake up means understanding your situation for exactly what it is. And understanding that situation is understanding that the city of New York is a corporation. They're not in the business of social services. They provide social services as a byproduct of all of the other revenue generating activity that they do as essentially a contractor for the state of New York. We got to wake up about that. This idea that the city of New York, is tasked with providing the optimal social services to people that live in the confines of the 5 counties in the lowest state of New York. We need to stop that and really be real about what the city of New York actually is and what its purpose is, right? Because we see it in the budget every single year. Education gets cut, libraries get cut, social services get cut, housing gets cut, but there's magically billions of dollars for the police department, right? This is not somebody that's asleep at the helm or hasn't had the light bulb turned on or they need to read the right socialist document. No, this is the purpose of what the corporation is about. Definitely. So we need to wake up about
money.
That.
Bottom line.
Bottom line. But it's a package deal, right? You're not going to be able to run Department of Transportation that collects money in tickets and towing people, or run Department of Finance that collects taxes, or runs the police department that'll run a slave patrol operation without having the other operations that go with it, right? Child protection, and education and other social services. So it's a package deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the revenue generating activities to the best of my ability and the social activities to the least of my ability.
Yeah. That's those things are there to sustain. Those help sustain the system, because it's saying, hey, we got things, we put things in place, we are addressing the problem, no matter how effective it is,
right? It's I don't even want to use the old term band-aid. It's for a purpose, right? And I see your comments popping up. The school system, when the city of New York operates the Department of Education, is not necessarily to educate children in a way that will have them thrive. It's a way to produce permanent workers, right? People that will align themselves politically and socially with the white settler colonialist system. That's the purpose of operating the Department of Ed, right? But we're not going to do it great. We're going to do it just enough to meet the goal, the long-term goal of what type of adults we want to turn out. People that are short attention spans. I'm going to loop it back to Jordan Neely. Short attention spans, apathetic, self-serving, entitled, all of these, I call it arrow ignorant personality types that don't serve African people overall. It serves white settler colonialism. So we need to be real around what the city of New York actually is and its purpose for operating, so we don't stay on this sort of hamster wheel asking existential questions around why don't they put more money in the budget? Come on, we gotta move on from that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, because I think like you're saying, and I think like the title of your, like you said before, how this case calls us to do some introspection as a community, and think about the way that we are thinking about the city. And I don't think that most people most of our people in particular, even if we're thinking about so specifically Black people within the New York, are thinking about the city as that, but at this and while being attacked by the city at the same time. So we know that we're not only, victim to or sus, what's the word I'm looking for? But like, we're open to being violated at any moment in the case of Jordan Neely, but also that, within what's been happening with this ethnic cleansing of Black people out of New York City, out of particular areas, we are already being attacked in so many ways with, even Eric Adams who, when he came into his administration, bringing back broken window policies, Giuliani policies that we know didn't work either, but also
those never left. De Blasio was doing it hard body as well. Those never left. Once quality of life got in the so-called lexicon and turnstiles were built in the transit system. Remember, once turnstiles were built, right, that was broken windows right there. Once there were turnstiles built, and a so-called
you gotta break that down. I can't let that one go by.
You can't let that one go by. Okay, so I don't know how old you guys are, right? But I'm old enough to remember a time where the train stations in New York City were not fully gated the way they are now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when Shannon, when Sister Shannon brought it, the turnstile thing, it made me think about it, even the way in which, the brother who got shot, for fare evasion, and
Darrell Mickles.
Yeah, and this whole push, to criminalize people for jumping turnstiles, and the way that they're thinking about bringing in these other types of turnstiles that they think are going to. So
all of that is, all of those are different iterations and levels of criminalization, which further the slave patrol operation of the city of New York. Correct? Through these sorts of contracts between MTA and the city of New York to put NYPD in the MTA. And, we won't even get into the corruption connection, right? Because these private security companies that are now in the MTA, were propped up by certain people in the administration of the city of New York who have now since been put out in, surrounding scandal, but have a financial hand in the security companies that have placed people inside the subway system for enforcement purposes. So
security people too. Just for a point of clarity, those are like that's NYPD, right? That the police officers, the MTA police, right?
Okay. So you have what we're seeing right now in the subway. You can enter the subway and see a National Guard person.
Yeah.
You can see an NYPD person. You could potentially see a state police person, right? Cuomo scaled that back after a while, but you could potentially see that. And then now you have private security company inside of the MTA, which are respectfully low wage security workers that you may see in a public assistance or welfare office, or that you may see in the lobby of a building. Now they've been contracted to stand in front of gates and other exit and entry doors in the MTA to so-called prevent fare beating, right? But these are the lowest wage earners in the city, security guards. They're coming in at less than $22 an hour, and you cannot pay fair market rent even for a studio with $22 an hour without some type of subsidized rent. So again, you're seeing where the subways, the underground, is the chasm of, or the clash, the contradiction of the collapse of all of services, of supports, of the economy of New York City. Because it's almost ridiculous that you'll have a NYPD person in the train station that will write you a ticket for $100 for a $2.90 fare, they may be making $85,000 a year. Then you'll have someone from Allied Security standing in front of the gate making $19 an hour, and is at much physical risk as the other type of person in the subway system. So there's a lot for us to dig out of that as African people, and there's a lot of work that we need to do internally. This is why the article talks about reorganizing ourselves, because let's also be real. The jury had no fear because we weren't out there. They didn't even get to leave the courtroom and see 500 people out front. They didn't leave the courtroom and see an overflow of 100 people waiting to get in. Absolutely not. There were 18 gallery seats.
Yeah.
And there was no necessity for an overflow room. I've been in other court hearing environments where so many people showed up, the judge had no choice but to make an overflow room.
Mm-hmm.
This is telling you how much presence that we have, and the way that Bronx Sites for NYPD Accountability and other organizations rallied around to say, okay, I can appear at the hearing this day, you can go this day, you can go this day. Community must be positioned and poised to do the same thing, right? We're all not sitting around with nothing to do, but we understood the mandate and made the sacrifice to say, okay, I'm not going to go to work today, I'm going to be here. Right. And we have to be positioned to do that in order to bear witness. Very important.
Yeah, just really quick to the point about the jury. You said with the stage set in your article, and we could share this article, right? We could put it in the chat. Okay. You said with the stage set, all of the forces of white supremacy conjoined to coddle the jurors and Penny, a cream puff prosecution, a $3 million legal defense fund for Penny. We talked about these millions of dollars he was able to raise. Peremptory jury challenges, leaving black jurors off the trial, and a cop mayor, homeless people, a cancerous sore, and little public presence inside and outside the trial, as you just alluded to. But yeah, I'm gonna put this article in the chat too for folks to read. I want to encourage you to check it out. It was a powerful piece. You want to speak more to that? And this comment the mayor made during the trial, saying that, I'm paraphrasing, but it was along the lines that, you know, basically he did the right thing. You know, if he was in a situation, he would do. He was kind of like propping Daniel Penny up to be a hero, but this is during the
now. Yeah, but that was the whole basis, and this is why I called it a cream puff prosecution, right? The entire basis that it was okay for Daniel Penny to even touch Jordan Neely is problematic in of itself, right? Further in the article, you know, I have the opinion that if it's going to be a not guilty anyway, Bragg could have stood on business and said, listen, you didn't have a right to touch Jordan, period. You didn't have a right to touch him. You cannot touch people based on what you think they might gonna do, right? We all ride the train every day. And if someone boards the train that we may have a concern about, for whatever reason we may have that concern, you almost have to say to yourself, listen, it's either I'm going to get up and get off at the next stop, I'm going to reposition my seating, or it's about to go down today. Simple as that. It's not, oh, I don't like the way this person looks, I don't like the way they sound, I'm going to put my hands on them. Absolutely not. It just does not go that way. Period. So for the prosecution to even build a case off the foundation that Penny was correct in even touching Jordan Neely, this is what African people need to zoom in on. New York State is basically saying that if white people have a fear of us, they can touch us preemptively. They can do that, which is not new, right? That's not new. It's just being, you know, recertified or restamped or brought back up for people.
Got recertified like every 5 years.
You know
like,
what I'm
we
saying?
need
If
a
you
new
don't
case.
know now, you know. So if you're 50 years old, you've seen this multiple times. If you're 30 years old, you might have seen it a few times. If you're 20 years old, you might have seen it once before. If you're 15, you may have never seen it. So now this is your education. This is why it needs to be reiterated by the settler colonialist state over and over and over. Right? I go back to Bernard Getz. I'm 48 years old. I remember Bernie Getz. This was outrageous. You know, he shot those kids in the back on the train, right? Those kids were shot in the back. He got the gun charge. That's it. That's it.
So Natasha, make sure when you go on the train, don't talk too loud. Somebody might be in fear of their life. You know.
Listen, and
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, we get into it. Swipe It Forward, which has been in tune to Black self-defense in the MTA since 2016, has recounted that as well. Let's also have a real conversation, that wake up part. There is plenty of work to do around anti-Blackness. The day I witnessed in court and watched the witness testimony, it was very clear cut along racial and cultural lines. The Latino people were scared of Jordan Neely. The Black person was not. Now, later on in the trial, some video was shown where there were African people on camera on the platform saying that they were afraid. But that first day, the description of Jordan Neely, what made you afraid of him? It was his tone. It was his tone, right? So there is work to do, and I also touch on that in my article as far as African people do the work to reorganize and empower ourselves. There's also a mandate from other non-Black POCs and Caucasians to do the anti-Blackness work that is necessary in their community and get up out our business. Okay, 2025, white opinion costs $10.
I don't get that one, but
I'm gonna say it again. In 2025, white opinion costs $10.
What does Black opinions cost?
Free all the time. I'm always willing to hear what an African person has to say, because many times we don't even have a voice. So sometimes when we get these sort of platforms and microphones, we may not even know how to shut up. But that's free all day, all the time. But white opinion, that costs you $10.
That's why we don't have too many white people on this platform, because of the rate that we charge for them to come. So just for those people who think that we out here, we offer opportunities for all groups. White people just can't afford the cost.
No, they're not willing to pay.
They're
not willing to pay. It's not they're not willing to pay.
That is true.
They're not willing to pay, and that's the bottom line, right? They're not willing to pay. So that's saying something about the work that we need to do to continue to organize and reorganize. Who needs to be where doing what work? And in that article, I talk about that sort of cultural revolution that other folk need to have, right? The city of New York is huge, right? What do we have? 150,000 employees in the city of New York. Folks have to do work around that cultural revolution to address these feelings that how do we come out with Daniel Penny being a so-called hero in New York that is a duty to flee state? That's not that. How did that emerge from that? We're not in Florida. How did that happen?
Hey, New York is very oppressive for folks who are not familiar with New York. And not saying that it's not like that in other places too, but New York is a different beast, man. And I mean, you mentioned earlier about the National Guard and the security forces. Like, that's what you see in New York. And when I came to when I was traveling, because I work in Brooklyn, of course. So I'm leaving from Philadelphia, commuting to Brooklyn, and I'm seeing a big difference on that line. I'm on 3 line, 4 line, 2, 5, and train line, that is. And I seen a big difference Brooklyn, because I that line through Crown Heights, East New York. Don't know. And I saw that when there's always been a sort of a police presence at certain stops, but one day I was traveling, and every stop I was seeing police officers. Like every stop, going to Brownsville, East New York, and I'm like, hold on, like this is different. You might see him at Franklin, or another stop, but every station, and not just on the platform. When you go downstairs, they were on the corners. So I'm like, looking like an occupying force.
Right. It's called omnipresence.
Omnipresence. That's it. They was definitely omnipresent. And like Franklin, I'm over there. It seemed like that was sort of like the ground where they was just going for it. You see something like 20, 30 police officers, and they getting on the trains. And head up just to say, like, when I saw that, this was before before Darrell Mickles, which I remember, I said to myself, and I may have had this conversation with you, I said something's going to happen, right? There's going to be some sort of shooting, some sort of police beating, because when you have that many police officers, especially in a place in a community that has been historically, in a group of people who've been historically oppressed, continues to be oppressed and exploited, right? You're going to have something. You're going to have some tension. You're going to have some tension. People going to work, they don't want to see the police and being harassed by the police. And you got people who don't have resources, who may be trying to get on, because there is a culture in New York where, people say $2, $3. They might be using that for.
Listen, listen, people, it's a double payment. You pay $2.90 to get on the train. You already paid. You're paying twice. People need to wake up about that too. You're paying twice. You've already paid through your.
It should be free, but that's a different conversation. But
it's actually right within the conversation, right? If the fare was free, we would not have this level of criminalization, right?
Yeah, and criminalization is a great word. I'm sorry to cut you off, but just going to the comment, there's a false sense of high crimes to excuse this. That I'll put in the chat. I just thought that was a powerful statement. But
yes,
go ahead,
I'm actually seeing that chat, and that's also very important, because I don't know if you guys remember during the de Blasio administration, there was a point where it was shown how many Black housing neighborhoods didn't have shootings in X amount of period of time. Oh, Queensbridge hasn't had a shooting in 13 months. This housing development hasn't had a shooting in X amount of period of time. This is not about the safety of African people. It's about clearing the way for greedy prospectors and real estate tycoons to come in and gentrify the area. Right? Real estate tycoons are not going to come in when, somebody's getting shot 3 times a day. It's not going to happen. So it's serving multiple purposes. It's like the eye of a fly. So I'm uber concentrated. I would be uber concentrated in areas like Brownsville and East New York to do what? To slave patrol, bring excessive fines to the community for so-called fare evasion. If I'm able to pull you into Rikers off of that, I can do that. And then I'm creating this, they talk about it a lot on mass mind control media, this perception of safety amongst people that are not African people. They need to feel safe. They need to feel safe. So this omnipresence serves multiple layered purposes, all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't know, Tasha, you want to say something?
Oh, no, I mean,
a lot to say, but
No, I mean, I think just with Sister Shannon when she's talking about the way in which this idea of Black people as, you know, these, again, going back to the whole, his tone was the thing. How do you make white people feel safe? How do you make those who you want, who are the desired population that you want within New York City, feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I can move here, or, you know, I feel safe getting on the train, or I feel safe doing this, and I don't feel safe doing that, and so therefore I'm allowed to do such and such, and make it feel that like, okay, yeah, we're welcoming you, we're having you come in, and it's not even just, you know, and people within the United States that are being called to replace Black people within the city, but it's also those from outside of, you know, whites from outside of the United States that are also being told that, you know, come live here. We can, you know, you could live here, you could live there. There's some benefits for you, so that they're making a way to clear out, you know, to ethnically cleanse Black people out of the city, so that they can, again, going back to, you know, right, having more buildings built that are, you know, for them, and the rising cost of rents and the real estate industry, and the way, you know, what, as the one person in the comment section talked about, that we know. And also, I think you mentioned it in your article as well, Shannon, like, you know, the way that we have within New York so much more empty housing. You have empty housing, more available units than you know, where that you can house people who are unhoused, but yet you're not doing any of those things, right? We know shelters are overcrowded, we know they're not getting the kind of services that they need, but we also know at the same time that you have all of this housing that is here sitting empty, but nothing's being done with it, because those are not the desired people that you want within New York. So I mean, I think New York is going through a shift, and within that shift, that they're pushing us out, but also it's bringing forth like this heavy, you know, presence of the police on the trains to make people feel safe, because they're, you know, quote unquote safe, because they're trying to shift the population.
And also there's this sort of sweet spot with the nonprofit industrial complex that gets contracted to provide certain social services, right? There's a reasonable amount of social services to provide where the nonprofit operators make a hell of a lot of money, but then there's too much where they can't handle it, and then not enough where the contract doesn't justify it, right? So there's this sort of sweet spot. There's this sort of sweet spot if you are one of these contracted social services providers. So there's also a financial benefit to folks not having their own homes, being drug addicted, being untreated for mental illness as they move about the city. And as those nonprofit operators provide minimal services for the most money, whatever falls through the cracks, the police are there to head crack. But now even further still, we've extended that to white vigilantism.
Hey, I gotta learn how to multitask. Distracted, man. People trolling, flooding the chat, man. Had to. I know you was working too, Natasha. Okay. I saw you working. I was like, she beat me to it.
The important part about doing this work and talking to folks is we're saying what it is that we say, right? It's not about saying what's necessary to sell ads or get clicks or raise our stock value in this sort of, you know, fictitious metaverse where we're trying to ignite the most underdeveloped parts of our psyche. That's not what we're trying to do here. Not at all. At least not on this platform, not what my organization does, and not what other organizations do. So I would encourage those that are on the line, that are listening, that are finding value in what we're discussing here. The homework is, right? And this is the difference between being a Black liberator and a so-called influencer, right? The Black liberator is always going to assign homeworks. It's not just for you to listen to me or Ikemba and Natasha just gum flat for 2 hours, right? Because that level of high baddie Zeus level entertainment you're not getting here is not happening here, right? But the value that's supposed to come from it is organizing yourselves. If you find value in what you heard here, it's saying, okay, now, and I mentioned it in the article, we can't let what happened to Jordan Neely happen to Darrell Mickles. Well, folks show up to Darrell Mickles' next court date. Right. He got shot up by the police on the platform. The police department the state has levied all kind of charges against him. He's behind bars at this time. And the only person showing up to court for him is his mother. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, there are dozens of NYPD in the waiting area to intimidate whoever shows up on Darrell Mickles' behalf. Are we going to allow that? Right? These are the things that we need to do, which are our homeworks. You've heard me say this before. The same judge that's hearing Darrell Mickles' case is the same judge that's hearing the case that heard Akai Gurley, that gave Peter Liang the no jail time sentencing. Come on, people, let's be real. Wake up. Clean up, stand up, wake up, understand your situation for what it is. Clean up, abandon self-deprecating behaviors that hold us back, and stand up. Have the self-pride to get moving and the razor sharpness to liberate ourselves and be self-determinant. That's what we're trying to do.
Hey, some people don't want to do that, you know. Some people are just looking for something to their brain. They just like to have their brain challenged and stimulated. They just want to sit up, you know, on social media and, you know, YouTube all day and just criticize and critique. You know, some of these people aren't about putting in any work or making any change in society. But to your point about Darrell Mickles, yeah, you know, we was in the courtroom at his last court date. His next one is February 5th for anyone who's in the area want to pop up, show up and support. But yeah, you know, we was in there. We were in communication with his mother, and we actually are going to be supporting his mother and Darrell Mickles in this case. So we, you know, took it up with the Al Sharptons and all of them, the Ben Crons. They know where to be found. Luckily, they aren't either. So, you know, we definitely, the mother is, she's, you know, grateful. Organization is getting off. She said her and Mickles prayed for this. So, Jesus, we answered Jesus' call, and, you know, we there. No disrespect to her. That was a little joke, but yeah. Nobody found that funny. All right, y'all religious? All right.
No. That wasn't
I was being serious though.
Why I did not laugh at that? That wasn't even why. That was not even why.
No, I was being mad serious. I get it.
Because what I guess for me, what clicks off in my head and what I tell organizers is, listen, you have your politics, and your politics is what's going to lend you to certain actions around Black liberation, not necessarily what a particular family member may ask of you or what they want or desire, because they may or may not be politicized in a way where things need to be done the way they need to be done. So we need to remember that as well. We wrap all of our African parents in love and in support, but we're grounded by our politics and the desire for liberation, not necessarily what somebody's mama said.
Yeah, right? No, I was halfway joking, because at the end of the day,
benefit of your listeners, because
no, but I just want to say though,
there are other cases where in the city of New York, where African people have gotten railroaded by the system, and the family members involved prefer to rely on their religious community. I'm not saying this is what Darrell Mickles' mom is doing, but in my experience, I've witnessed this up close and firsthand. Railroading by the settler colonialist system, and the family members rely on their church community and their religion in order to deliver them from this situation, and that ain't enough. Period.
For sure.
It's not.
You know, but for the record, you know, I was halfway joking. I was being serious. But for the record, I do believe in Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I know the listeners probably looking at me.
Tomorrow,
they probably looking at me crazy right now. I don't celebrate Christmas though. You know,
but no, I didn't.
There's a lot. You know, you guys might learn about me today.
Oh, that's right. Thank you for those fun facts. I start on.
Oh yeah. Jesus is definitely Easter.
Exactly. Yes.
My favorite 7 days of the year. So
Easter is definitely in my life, but no, really, but just back to, I mean, just the point. I just want to you know, bring this home about Darrell Mickles, like in that court case, because one of the things we want to do is organize and get some resources to get Mickles a lawyer. Sitting in that court, we sat in that court for I want to say 4 hours, you know, maybe a little bit more than 4 hours, right? Around 4 hours, and we were looking at all of the different cases. We were seeing, you know, mostly our folks in there for one. We're seeing there were cases people were standing in front of the judge. This one guy, look, I think it's a Russian guy, and he was in there for a hate crime, and he assaulted someone, and they were talking about if he goes to, I guess, go to some anger management class, when he comes back, they'll drop the charges to attempted, or rescind the charges to an attempted assault, and he won't do any jail time, all of this stuff. You know, I thought was crazy, you know what I'm saying? But there was people in there for the hate crimes, but I was the PDs though, and I think this is important, like the public defenders are getting people to take guilty pleas, right? They're getting them to take these guilty pleas and having them serve time in prison, and they're not fighting. Some of these people, like they're not even fighting their cases because of what the public defender is, what the result may be. They go to trial. And there was one in there arguing with lawyers, saying he got a piece of shit lawyer and so forth. And the judge is saying that give you the best deal you possibly got. Maybe he could have got off. He could have been free. What do you mean? But that's what the judge's response was.
Well, let's dig
Mickles' lawyer. Let me just say
the legal.
Let me just say this about Mickles' lawyer. Mickles' lawyer is very disinterested in this case. I just want to let the people, like, he needs a lawyer. He's very disinterested in this case, and I'm not going to be surprised if he's going to tell Mickles to stop a plea. Mickles has pled guilty.
Okay, no.
This is what I, you know, just from seeing the way he is in the courtroom that day.
What I wanted to add for some context, just to keep everything, you know, linked, right? Remember, legal services organizations receive funding from the city of New York, right? Let's remember that when we're evaluating the experience that so-called defendants are receiving, correct? So let's make that make sense. So how much can you go against your benefactor? If you receive 40%, 60% of your funding from the city of New York, right? You do too well, you're not going to get the money. You speak against the city of New York in a certain way, you're not going to get the money. You won't be able to survive. And then also, there's been some critiques over points in time around the way, you know, these public defenders' pay scales are structured, right? If I get $400 for a fair beating case, and I also get $400 for a murder case, what does it behoove me to do? Do I do 5,000 hours for $400, or do I do 15 minutes for $400 and 2 hours for $400? You understand what I'm saying? As far as how that is structured in the way it disincentivizes strong legal work. All right, that's a disincentive.
And also, you know, not prosecutors, I keep saying prosecutors, public defenders making people take these, you know, plead guilty and take these deals. We know that that's also been an issue for decades. This is the same complaint that people have been having, especially when we think about Black people who encounter the court system, is that they're forced to take these pleas and forced to say that they're guilty even when they're not, because of the fact that, like Sister Shannon is saying, the way that the pay structure is set up and the amount of cases that exist and all of the different dynamics that work within this whole, you know, public defenders kind of office, and, you know, the lawyers and things like that. So this is
Natasha, I can't tell you how many times over the past 10 years I've been in different conversations with you know, Black legal and meetings that I either was invited to or was not invited to, around, you know, Black lawyers' response. Let's take it back 10 years or more to so-called BLM, Black Lives Matter. What did they have a responsibility to do? And this is what I mean in the article about Africans. We have to tighten up and reorganize ourselves, right? There's also an elitism in the legal community. Let's be real, right? There's an elitism there. Ain't nobody running to find out, ain't no Black lawyer running to find out what's going on with Darrell Nichols. No. Again, it's around who we identify with, what is clicking off in our psyche around, like those comments around being an influencer. Can me being front page on this case, what could that get me personally? I call it opportunism, right? A lot of, you know, I call it opportunism. Folks are living like that as well. So this is part of the reorganization that African people must do. We have to abandon those sort of hierarchies around who is fit to do what, you know, even in liberation work, right? Lawyers may look at street organizers differently, that look at so-called academics differently, that look at, you know, medical people differently. And we have to commit a sort of class suicide in that way, and cut the elitism in order to prioritize organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the same way. I think you know, Gerald Horne has talked about the way we know that whites, in many instances, we've seen them do this class collaboration to protect the interests of themselves. And so in that same way, you know, we have, you know, the history of us doing that kind of class collaboration, but like we're saying now, like in a time today, what we're being called to do, is to reorganize and re-strategize, because that kind of class collaboration has dwindled, has slipped away, is not as strong as the way in which we've seen it been done before. And we know that there's, you know, part of what we're talking about here in terms of the ways in which Black people are targeted, have been targeted, as well as organizations have been targeted, and all these other things plays a part in why people why in which we don't have that kind of trust and that kind of cohesiveness across classes in the way that we need to, in the way that we know that is part of the liberation struggle. Like we're not going to get to our liberation without being able to collaborate in those kind of ways, and see that even going back to like the whole conversation we're talking about, that whatever happens to, you know, a Jordan Neely or a Darrell Nichols could easily also happen to you. It really don't matter if you are, you know, you could be a lawyer and that could happen to you. Like, you know, you could be, you know, a working class person and that could happen to you. Like, the fact that you are Black puts you at risk, period, at any moment. And you don't know when or where, by who it could happen. You know, it could be a vigilante, it could be a police person, like it could be, you don't know. And so understanding that, going back to what we talk about, you know, this idea that we are one people and our struggles are bound up within one another's, whether locally and globally. So when something happens, you have to understand that is something that could also happen to you. It could happen to your niece, it could happen to your nephew, it could happen to your mom, it could happen to your dad, it could happen to your aunt, it could happen to anybody. And so you have to know that when you're supporting and you're thinking about how your particular skill set fits into the work that we need to do, you have to understand that you're not necessarily only doing that work for whoever, you know, might need it at the time, but you're also doing it for yourself. You're also doing it for your family. And that's when because it's the same thing, you know, what there's a saying that says, like, you know, whatever freedom is worth to the whites, you know, it must be worth to Blacks or something. I forget who said it, but like this idea that you have to understand that what you're doing, there's a bigger aim to it, there's a bigger purpose to it. And it's not just like it can't just be about, okay, what only can I benefit from, but like the benefit of what you would be doing in terms of like using your abilities to support the liberation struggle is way bigger than, you know, what you think you can get, you know, being in front of a newspaper or in a month or in 2 years or whatever. Like it's much, much bigger than that, and it's much deeper than that.
And I'm checking the chat, right? So Brother
But
Bakra said,
before, because I want to give you the last word. We got
copy that.
minutes.
Ooh,
We did this last
time, honey.
But to that point, because I think you're about to build on it, the African warrior, because that's what I was waiting for you to finish, Natasha, and I was going to come in with that, and Bakra beat me to it. But it's that African national consciousness. I wasn't going to say warrior, but I love warrior. But, you know, that African national consciousness is what we need. But I'm going to let you go, Shannon, and
I'm gonna bring that into the context of why we did not have an overflow room for Jordan Neely, why we didn't have 500 or 1,000 people out in front of 100 Center Street for Jordan Neely. As Bakra said, that lack of African warrior consciousness. We have now had, and I'm speaking in New York City, and it's probably classic in other cities in America, we've had 30 years of Teach for America, where folks from Iowa, Idaho have come into the public education system here. There's been a reverse migration back to the South, and New York City particularly has lost a great body of Black conscious educators, right? And foundational places for Black children to grow up and learn that warrior consciousness that will feed into our duty to respond to these situations, right? This is 2024. I joke with you guys all the time. People say I'm born in 1900 now. We're getting 25 years into the so-called 2000s, and we have adults now that are over 21, approaching 30, that have never been exposed to Black nationalism, whether it's coming from a community basis, a educational foundational basis, and it is producing the apathy, it's producing individualism, it's producing entitlement, as I said before, which is, again, I argue, the purpose of the city of New York, to turn out apathetic wage slaves that do not have African consciousness, that will not turn into or produce African liberators in the city of New York. So that's where we are. This is this reorganization part. This is this wake up part.
Hey, there it is. Natasha, take us home.
Well, Sister Shannon gave us the homework, right? To make sure you're showing up at the court, but also to make sure that you're also supporting. What are you doing to put your gifts whatever they may be, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an artist, whoever you are, what are you doing to put your gifts and support behind the liberation struggle? So I think that's the people's homework, right? Don't just listen to it, right? But also take action. Don't just listen to what we're saying. Also read Sister Shannon's article, and also read the books that we're talking about. Like, have an analysis, check on your neighbor, connect with the other person, so that we can start to break down these individualistic silo walls that that have been created and erected within this time that we are in currently right now. Anyway, so I think that's it. Sister Shannon gave us the homework, so you guys know what to do. But thank you.
Y'all gonna ask about that at the next program, right? It's not okay. The follow up, press people about it. At the next one, what did we do here? How did you organize your community? Tell us about that. Feel free to follow Bronx Sites for NYPD Accountability on social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter. Read the Substack. I write sometimes. Thank you guys for inviting me on the platform once again. I appreciate it
too. Powerful piece, well written.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us this early morning. Thank you, Sister Shannon, for joining us this early morning on the Rise Up International Morning Show on Black Power Media Reloaded. You catch us every morning, not every morning, Tuesdays to Friday mornings from 7 to 9, our new time. So look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow. Rise up.
Rise up.
Uhuru.
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 Sometimes the riot is a quiet one, or the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares, mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces winners on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. What we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my inner me really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven, like heaven's only in the sky. Like chariots are swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face the same. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Where we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my enemy is really a mirror for the galaxy.